Hello, world, friends, family, YouTube. It's Mike again, and I'm here with Brew Bros. Today's episode is going to be a little different than normal. I'm going to talk about something that millions of self-help books have been written about. A lot of people have made money on this topic, but I'm giving it to you for free. I'm going to give it to you right here. We're going to talk about time management and how I manage my time. I'm going to tell you how I judge time. I'm going to tell you how I figure out how much time something's going to take me. I'm going to give you an idea of how I know how long it's going to take and how long these projects are going to last. And the way I do that is through beer. That's right. I measure my time and how much beer something's going to cost me to do, or how many beers I'm going to drink to accomplish that task. Now, when you're figuring this out, you're going to use just a standard beer. Normally, I'll go with the 12-ounce aluminum can. But today, I've tackled a task that seems to be a little arduous. So I'm going with 16-ounce, tall boy. It's been tough so far. I've spent about 8 hours trying to get one thing done on my truck. And it's kicking my butt, to be honest with you. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But I use beers. You might be asking yourself, Mike, how does one measure how many minutes it takes to drink a beer, and isn't that subjective? The answer is yes, and simple. There's a formula that you can use. You take the ounces in your beer, you divide it by the minutes in an hour, you subtract that by pi, then you have to get the circumference of the earth, your exact location, and its relativeness to the sun. You also have to take into account wind direction, and then you also have to factor in the RE factor. Once you get done with all that, it's pretty simple, just basic multiplication and division. You can figure out exactly how much beer you're going to need for a project. But for simple folk like myself and maybe some of you out there, I'm just going to break it down pretty easy. Now, when I do this, I don't like to use some kind of fancy beer that I've never drank before. I like to use my trusty go-to beers. And those go-to beers are Miller Lite and Coors Light. You need to find a beer, and it could be any beer that you want. You need to find a beer that you can drink a whole pile of, or even a whole mess of if it requires that much beer. And you kind of get into that a little bit later. I'll give you some examples and kind of help you figure out how that goes. And the first example I'd like to give you is something simple, something a lot of us do in our own time every weekend, especially down here in South Florida. It's mow our lawn. Mowing my lawn costs me anywhere from 3 to 4 beers worth of time. I like to get the edging and weed eating out of the way. So you can't be drinking a beer while you're doing that because you need 2 hands. But once I jump on my lawnmower, it's a riding lawnmower, I like to get myself what I call a cruising beer. So that's beer number 1, the cruising beer. So normally, depending on how hot I am, or it is, I will drink that beer while I'm mowing the grass. Now, sometimes if it's hot outside or I need to get a little extra motivation, I might drink 2 beers. 1 beer for the backyard, 1 beer for the front yard. So that would put us at 3 beers. And once you finish edging and mowing and then blowing everything off and making it decent, you would then have a celebratory beer. So that would put us at 3 to 4 beers for mowing the lawn. So it would take me 3 to 4 beers worth of time to mow my grass. It can always vary depending on the size of the lawn, whether you're push mowing, or if it's super hot out, you got some extra weeding you have to do or something like that. Obviously, you have to factor in those things on your own, and you can kind of figure that out as you go. Another example would be change the oil on my truck. Now, that's a pretty easy task for me. I do it all the time. So what I generally like to do is I like to start draining the oil, take the filter off, take the drain plug off, drain the oil, and then while the oil is draining, I like to have a standard 12-ounce aluminum can of beer and let it drain out. Normally, by the time I get done letting the oil drain, I'm done with that beer. So it's pretty simple. And then I'll fill up the oil, put everything back together, fill everything back up, and then I'll have another celebratory beer. So for me, changing my oil cost me 2 beers worth of time. I think you guys are getting the concept. Another example, fishing. Let's say you get out early in the morning, you got bait, you got the newest rods and reels, somebody gave you the best coordinates possible to find the best fish. You get out there and nothing's happening. You set everything up, time has gone by. You're starting to get bored, you're starting to wonder what you're doing with your life. Well, it's at about that time that I will say to myself, let's give this 1 beer's worth of time of fishing and see what happens. So, if the fish start biting within that time, then I know this spot is worth staying at. But if the fish aren't biting within this time, hey man, you gotta pack it up and call it a day and move on to the next spot. That's, just the reality of things. So, that's just kind of like the way I like to measure things. Now, you can't just get out there, you could definitely get out there and just start hammering beers. But you gotta start with a fresh beer when you start something like that. You're like, okay, I'm gonna give it this specific beer's worth of time. Now you can kind of change it up. Fishing's a little different. You might bring a little fancier beer out there. My new beer of choice for fishing right now has been that Reef Donkey stuff, man. That crap is delicious. Another good example is I like to work on my truck. I don't take it to mechanics. I like to work on my Jeep here, you see. Let's give this Jeep an example. I swapped the motor out a number of years back, and it took me a mess of beers. Sun up to sundown. That's just what it is. A whole mess of beers. That's a whole day's worth of drinking right there. Right now, which brings me to this video, which inspired me, doing some work on the old F350. I'm doing some front axle work. It's kicking my butt. So I got a general rule of thumb that I don't start working or start drinking while I'm working on my vehicles until things got difficult. Well, I got news for you folks. Things got difficult. I've been working tirelessly here all day and it's kicking my butt. So guess what? It's beer 30. Also another time management time. You can keep that, put it in your calendar. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that term, but I apply it to my chores and tasks throughout the day. So, things are getting difficult, so I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to drink this whole entire beer. I'm going to see if I can't get a little creative and maybe make some things happen. I'm sure it'll happen. It'll be fine. Usually when you get at least 2 or 3 beers in you, you get a good case of the fuckets, big hammers start coming out, and things start going together. Whether they're meant to be together or not, they're going together. Only time will tell if the repair will last. I'm sure it'll be fine. Everything will be fine. But that's pretty much how I manage my time. That's how I manage, small things like cooking dinner. That might take me a couple beers. Painting the bathroom. That's going to be at least 6 to 8 beers worth of time. Those kind of things. If you're out to dinner, you can tell yourself this is about a 3 beer time limit. You're going to go out to dinner. The waitress or waiter is going to ask you what you want to drink. You're going to say, I'm going to have this beer. You're going to drink that. By about the time the food comes out, you're probably done. You're going to order another beer. You're going to drink that. It's going to put you at 2 beers. And then close to the end of the meal, you're going to be ready for another beer. That's your 3rd beer. You're probably going to sit around, drink that beer, have some discussions. You should probably cap it off at that unless you're out there, to party. If your intentions of going to dinner was to get drunk, then by all means, scratch all those rules and get after it. Otherwise, good 3 beers. Hey, great night, great to see folks. It was awesome. And you go on about your merry way. And you go home and maybe continue drinking, I don't know, Maybe you have work or you want to get up and go to the gym the next morning, so you don't continue drinking. That's totally up to you. This is how this time management works. But overall, that's pretty much what I do. So this little video here has cost me about 3/4 of a 16-ounce of beer. All right, I'm gonna finish this. I'm gonna get back to working on this truck. Hopefully by the time you guys see this, I'll be done. And that's pretty much what I got for you. You guys, don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, MySpace, subscribe, like, do the things, click the links over here, wherever those links are, wherever they may take you. I hope it's a good place. And that's going to do it. I know this is a little long, but thanks for hanging in there. Cheers. Y'all have a good one.